As a recent, though major fan of Breaking Bad and, to a similar extent, Better Call Saul, El Camino was the final piece of this universe that I had left to watch. Unless you count Slip and Jimmy, but if you do that, then you need to seek professional help. A movie about Jesse right after the events of Breaking Bad? A very interesting idea, that's for sure, and you can have an interesting conversation about how necessary that storyline is. Personally, I think seeing him speed away with a flood of emotions was a perfect ending, but I'm not innately opposed to an epilogue for his character, and that's exactly what El Camino is. It's a lot harder to consider this a typical movie than it is to just think of it as a special event. Heck, it was even advertised as a special on Netflix. It doesn't have a ton to offer by itself as a film, and if you haven't watched Breaking Bad, I doubt it'll do much for you at all. Unlike Better Call Saul, which is a good show whether you've seen its predecessor or not. It's like if you never saw the original David S. Pumpkins skit and then watched the animated special about him and weren't a huge fan. It needs another piece of media to work well, which isn't 100% a flaw on its part, after all it is a sequel, but the fact that it's so dependent on Breaking Bad to be a good experience is somewhat concerning, since I'm not simply talking about the continuity. El Camino just doesn't have a lot going on, if I'm being honest. The movie boils down to a very straightforward story of Jesse trying to get enough money to create a new identity and lead a new life. It has him interact with Skinny Pete and Badger, then we have some flashback scenes with Todd, then he deals with the villains, and that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to say without spoiling, but if you want me to get into detail, then I have a bit more to say. One of the main issues with El Camino is how basic and unchallenged its central plot is. There is one simplistic detour to create conflict, but even that has a pretty predictable end. There's not much tension, and the film feels pretty much carried by the flashbacks, which are phenomenal. For a film that feels a little stuck in the past, it's fitting that the best thing about it is when Walter White and Jane show up. Their appearances lead to some brilliant dialogue and impactful scenes. The appearance of Jane is so impactful in the context of the story and caught me so off guard that it nearly brought me to tears. That's a sign that you're doing something right. But unlike Better Call Saul, El Camino isn't telling a fascinating story of its own that's only supported by cameos and flashbacks, but rather is basically defined by them, which is disappointing. It does pretty much everything it needs to and everything I could have imagined them addressing with Jesse's story, so there's not a ton to necessarily complain about, it's just that there isn't a ton to praise either because it's so simple of a movie. We see Jesse's parents again, and we see Jesse write a letter to Brock, so pretty much every loose end gets tied up in a satisfying way. The main issue lies not in how it functions more broadly within the Breaking Bad universe, but rather in how it tells its own proprietary story. El Camino mainly focuses on Jesse's conflict with Todd during flashbacks, as well as a new conflict with two criminals who work for a welding company. When he goes to Todd's old apartment to try and find the stash of money left there, these partners attack him and they make an agreement to split up the money. The scenes with these guys are pretty good, they have some tension and are the most interesting new thing that the movie brings to the table. Also, Neil, who's essentially the main villain, is played by the guy who played Big John in Halloween Kills, so that's pretty cool. We see Jesse's inner good demonstrated pretty well by his actions in this movie, and they all work quite well to build up his character a bit more. Aaron Paul kills it just as he did in Breaking Bad, so I have pretty much no complaints in terms of the acting, apart from one minor grievance. Why is Todd, well, fat? I know it's because the actor looks different that many years later, but it's seriously off-putting. Not anything that necessarily hurts the movie, but a detail that's also hard to ignore and that somewhat damages the continuity. But if you want to talk about something that legitimately hurts the film, let's talk about this scene. Essentially, Jesse gets the opportunity to kill Todd, like it would be extremely easy for him, but for some reason he doesn't take it. I can understand the intention here since they're trying to make Jesse out to be broken and good deep down, but then why does he choke Todd out the first chance he gets in the Breaking Bad finale? It might also be because Andrea was already killed off in front of him, but I'm not really certain if that's even true, and if it is, it's not made very clear. Plus, even if that's the case, why wouldn't Jesse do it for Brock's sake? I had assumed that Todd killed Brock along with Andrea, we just didn't see it on screen, but because of Jesse's letter to him at the end, that's apparently not true. So either he already killed Andrea but didn't kill Brock, so Jesse would still have the motivation to stop Todd, or he hadn't killed either and Jesse wouldn't be nearly as emotionally distraught. This scene could easily have been fixed if Todd said something like, "Well, you don't want to do that, Jesse, or Uncle Jack and I might have to pay that girl you're with a visit." But instead it sticks out as something that had me shouting at the screen for Jesse to just pull the trigger. As is typical for a Vince Gilligan project, it pays tribute to the Breaking Bad universe brilliantly, not only with the cameos and flashbacks, but with incredibly small, blink-and-miss-it appearances from characters like Suzanne Erickson from Better Call Saul, who I noticed on the TV screen and had to double-check to make sure it was actually her. That level of detail is commendable. And what else is commendable is how the film is shot. It looks beautiful and cinematic beyond belief. It's a proper evolution of how Breaking Bad was filmed, with so much flair and beauty to appreciate. There aren't that many crazy shots or anything, it's no technical marvel, but there are a few parts that look great and are very creative, like the one in Todd's apartment showing Jesse over a long period of time. In terms of music and sound, it's pretty forgettable, to be honest. I couldn't tell you one song from the movie apart from maybe the one Todd hilariously sang along to on the radio. The tone of this movie is very effective, though, since a lot of the scenes with Todd are darkly comedic, such as the part where he's offering Jesse different types of soup while an innocent woman's corpse is lying right next to him. The way it blends serious moments, tragic ones, and breathtaking, nostalgic flashbacks with funny parts is fantastic. So, while it might not be the best movie I've ever seen on its own, it's a good, nice epilogue to this universe. If you've watched Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, checking this out serves as a great way to reflect upon the masterful journey you've gone on, even if it itself is not as good as those two shows. There are many quotable lines here that left a pretty good impression on me, and for the handling of Mike, Walter, and Jane in here alone, it's worth watching, but it's also a pretty decent, though not super exciting or tumultuous story on its own. Far from the pinnacle of storytelling, but you could do much worse. I'd still recommend this as a nice little bookend. 3.5 out of 5.
Walter? It's really you.
Yes. Yes.
Why here?
You thought to look here. You tell me.
Salter told me to come here.
Oh. Is that his newest name? Great.
He told me that, you're sorry. I want you to know that.
Well then, he's sorry. And that's how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm too.
Why? Why are you sorry? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why exactly do you feel compelled to apologize to me?
I drove you away.
No. Wrong answer. The only person who drove me away was myself.
What do you mean?
Jesse, I hated you. Violently. I thought every day about it. Why does he get all that? Why do I get nothing?
So then why did you work with me?
Honestly, because I didn't know what else to do. Because, deep down, I knew I was wrong to hate you. I was the only one who really cared.
But it wasn't your fault either.
No, it was. Jesse, that's what I've discovered while being here. The world is a filthy place. It isn't fair. It isn't righteous. that doesn't change, no matter where you run away to, no matter what you try. The only way I could manage to get ahead was to betray it all, to leave it all behind, to devolve until I was down there with the rest of it. It's just... But I've learned that's just... Frankly, that's just because I couldn't put up with how the world works. It doesn't matter how amazing you think you are. It doesn't matter what your perception is of the world. Whether you think you're above the highest skyscrapers or a filthy speck of dust in this infinite universe, you can't change the world. But now, I've learned that I just have to put up with that. I just have to accept it.
But Walter, we are the world. If it's not for us or a million, thousand other copies of us living in it, then what makes up the world? How can you hate a world and love someone in it?
Well,
No, you're wrong this time. Listen to me. I've just seen a man who everyone believed to be a monster put everything he's got into helping out someone who hates him. That's how the world works. That's how it can work if we're not willing to give up. So no, it's not your fault for wanting this all to change. It'd be better, because if nobody's there to want that, how will it ever happen?
Jesse, when I left that voicemail, I thought you'd never learn to understand. I thought it was sweet how quickly you called me back, but I didn't think you'd learn. But ever since I left, I've learned many things about the world. And I see now, you have too.
Yes, I have. The greatest lesson I've learned is that I'm glad you're still alive.
You're right, Jesse. I should be happy too, shouldn't I? You know, that thing you said about changing the world, maybe it isn't too far-fetched after all. I suppose if nobody else will create justice, then I'll have to.
Really? You're going to come back?